Hello, guys, and welcome to a new episode of Decentra Talks. Today, I have with me Patrick Thompson. Patrick, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Pat Thompson. I'm currently the vice president of the deal flow department over at Block which is pretty much kind of like a digital asset venture capital firm. Our main product is an incubator. I would relate the sort of whole operation to like what Y Combinator does. But to give a little like background as well, I mean, before that, I was a blockchain digital asset reporter from about 2015, August 2015 to 2022. So I was always had my eye on the space, like paying attention to the developments and what's emerging, what the trends were, and what people were interested in. And to me, what's even more important is what people weren't interested in. So I've always kind of had my head wrapped around like the blockchain digital asset space and everything that goes on within it.
Thank you for the introduction. That helps us know a lot about you. I have, like you said, you started writing in 2015 in the blockchain space, which was at the time pretty early, in my opinion. How did you get started in it, and what initially caught your interest in the space?
Yeah, great question. I mean, the interest began in, I believe it was 2013, and the reason it started was someone who lives in my area, they had a Facebook post, and they were an early Bitcoin miner, and their post was something like, they called it BitCents. You know, nobody even calls it BitCents, but what he was trying to communicate was that he had zero point zero 0.04 Bitcoin, and his post was, I have 4 BitCents at today's rate, that's worth $40. I'm going to throw a party with that money. But when I saw that, I was just like, what is this guy talking about? I don't know what a BitCent is. And then, I think he had the BTC ticker in his post, so I was able to search there. But by that point in time, by 2013, quite a few developments had happened in the blockchain space that I was able to read up on to kind of inform myself of what was going on. So by that, I mean, the guy had already bought the 2 pizzas for 10,000 BTC. Of course, there was a lot of like Silk Road, darknet market talk, and of course, they were using BTC as their currency. And that takes you to all sorts of places like why people sort of liked Bitcoin as money at that point in time. So I was able to read up a lot. I was able to keep track of it. And it was always something that was in my head that I was like keeping track of the price. It amazed me how quickly it moved. I'd never really seen anything like that, a 24-hour market. And then it got to the point, let's say about a year later, 2 years later, where I'm in college, broke college student who would, like some additional income. And I'm like, hey, I should do some freelance writing. I enjoy writing. I feel like I know quite a bit about this topic that is Bitcoin blockchain. Ethereum was becoming significant at the time because, like I said, this is like 2014, 2015 era. And I just started looking for sort of work in that area. And what it pretty much pointed me to, well, I'll backtrack a little bit. So my first article was actually called Whatever Happened to Bitcoin, Nothing Good. And it was written for a culture blog in Philadelphia. Their name was Oogie Woogie, but it doesn't exist at this point in time anymore. It's a defunct platform. And I ran into the editor-in-chief of that platform at an event that my buddy, photographer, videographer, was doing some work at. Me and him got to talking, then, we came to the conclusion that it'd be a good idea to sort of shed the spotlight on Bitcoin at that point in time. So that was my very first article. And then once you have one article, and this is kind of important to maybe anybody who's writing or interested in writing, you have a portfolio. You have this piece of work that you could shop around, point in different areas and be like, hey, I write about this topic. Do you need anybody else writing about this topic? So I had that one piece under my belt. And then I was looking for more writing work. And first it took me to a platform called coinidle.com. I did quite a bit of writing for them, but then shortly afterward, and as the portfolio expanded, I continued to sort of shop around my writing, my editing, the work that I was able to do, like consulting in that regard. And I ended up doing writing for Cointelegraph. So did that for quite a bit of time. And then from there, it moved over to CoinGeek.com, was the editor of the sort of North America region. But what that really just means is like I was still writing articles. I did a little bit of editing, or I could publish something at a pinch for sure. In terms, by that I mean like, nobody else is online. Like, yeah, I could get it online, get it published, make the edits to it. And also quite a bit of multimedia. And by that I mean like interviews, and I ran a little web show called More Than Money. But like in a nutshell, that's kind of what sparked my interest, what got me writing. And through all those years and all those experiences, you just continue to learn and grow, and that kind of takes me to where I am today over at Block Dojo.
So during my time researching for this episode, I have run into a lot of articles that you wrote for CoinGeek and Unbankd, which at least in my space, have been pretty notable. I hear about them a lot in different areas, and I actually go on CoinGeek often. I kind of want to linger a bit there and get an idea of how you got your foot through that door, because as they're more notable, it's like harder to get to that point. So I just want to get some background around that. How did you manage to get your first work with CoinGeek and Unbankd?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll give some life hacks along the way, right? And I think this is good for anybody who writes or isn't thinking about writing. So I'll start by just answering the question. Then I'm sure more information will come out along the way in terms of tips for writers. But so for CoinGeek, I was always interested. Well, for CoinGeek, right? BTC split off of BCH. And then there's a point in time when BSV spun off of BCH, and CoinGeek is pretty much one of the only mainstream media platforms that sheds light in a pretty unbiased way to every fork of Bitcoin. So of course, I was following this sort of Bitcoin road and the forks along the road, and that took me to CoinGeek originally, just like learning about it, a really good place for information that nobody else was willing to talk about. So I had CoinGeek kind of on my radar. They were having a conference over in Toronto at the point in time. And like I said, and it kind of links back to what I was saying before, I was always looking to do some freelance writing. So I reached out to the editor-in-chief at the time, but they actually got back to me saying, hey, you know what? We're not hiring at this point in time. I'm trying to think in my brain so I could put a date on it. Maybe this was like 2019. They said, hey, we're not hiring at this point in time, but we are having a conference out in Toronto. Here's a free ticket. Like, you can come out, see what it's about, talk to some people. We can meet in person. We can chat. So I did that. And, it was really good. And I think one reason I really liked it and why I still really think they put on great conferences is their sort of format isn't necessarily about, hey, these are coins, these are tokens. It's not about what I would call marketing gimmicks, right? It's about like, hey, a blockchain protocol can be used in a technology stack in this way, shape, or form to, as I say, increase efficiency or reduce costs. So, but that's what put CoinGeek on my radar. I went to the conference. Everything was great. I learned about it. I went home, and then it was several months later that the editor-in-chief at the time, he reached out to me. Hey, you know what? You reached out originally. We weren't looking to hire. We're looking to expand the team at this point in time. Or is this something you're still interested in? And I was like, for sure. So we had that sort of interview, some writing samples were sent. And, long story short, that's really how I began writing over at CoinGeek. And now, like I said, I wanted to give some writers tips along the way, right? I mean, this, I think, is a pretty good process for anybody who's interested in doing maybe some writing on any sort of platform, is that it's good to know who the editor-in-chief is, because ultimately that's pretty much the top of the chain for a publishing, like a written media kind of news outlet. That's the person you'll ultimately want to talk to, because it doesn't really get any higher than that. So if you reach out to them, have that sort of conversation, they give it the green light, you could probably start writing. Otherwise, you probably have to go through some, maybe like an obscure chain where maybe you do this cold outreach and they're not so interested in your story, or you do a cold outreach and nobody really knows who you are, and they don't really need another story because they have writers. So if you're a writer and you're really looking to start writing for maybe a new platform, or really just like expand the sort of places that your work is published, definitely look to see who the editor-in-chief is and then start your conversation like that. But I think in a nutshell, that's probably the first half of your question. Now, was there a second half of the question? I've been going on a bit long-winded for a bit of time now.
No worries. So just to give you some like idea of what's going on with me, I like to write a bunch of questions and bullet points before I talk to somebody, so that I have like this train of thought that I can continue. And what's been interesting is that you managed to, without me telling you about any of it or sending you like the questions, you've managed to like go through everything I wanted to ask in the exact order. But to answer what you just said, how did you get your foot through the door with Unbankd? Because I see that you're writing for their newsletter.
Right, that was the second part of it. And before I answer the Unbankd bit, it was exciting, right? Like you said, I was totally not sent a list of questions before this, and I'm like, all right, we're just going to freestyle this one. But I will say, like, throughout my day and the work I do, and I think I've always kind of operated like this, I totally take like some notes on the side, because either I think things could be relevant in the future. I think things could be like good jump off points, good learning points. So I do like that style. Okay, now back to Unbankd. So Unbanked. This one's interesting, and I guess it's interesting in the sense that one, at the point in time, because this was many years ago. I mean, Unbanked, I might have started doing work with them maybe late 2018, 2019, something like that. I guess their founder is somebody who's in my network, and I'm not going to say names just because I don't know if they would like to be named or not. So I'm not going to say names. Somebody who's in my network, and at the point in time, I was actually going to an Ethereum conference over in Berlin. I forget the name of it, but it was taking place in Berlin. There was so much hype around Ethereum at that point in time because I guess that was kind of an era where maybe people were coming off the highs of an ICO and all the different things people were trying to do with ERC20 tokens. So I went over to this conference, but the person who's in my network and who does quite a bit of work with Unbanked, or like I said, founder might be the appropriate word for what they the role they help Unbanked out in. He lived over there at that point in time, and I never met him. I've only had conversations with him online, and then we pretty much just came to the conclusion like, hey, let's get a lunch together. So we got lunch together. We were just chatting about all the things we did, and I was aware of Unbanked, but I think at that point in time, I might not have been aware that he played a significant role in Unbanked. So maybe I chalk that up to being in the right place at the right time and just knowing this good person, great person, where we sat down together, we got talking. He's just like, hey, yeah, we could use a little bit of help at Unbanked. Like, there's this, and to talk about what I do at Unbanked, right? He's like, hey, there's this Friday newsletter. It's the free list. There's a paid tier, there's a free tier, but the free tier could use some help in terms of like who assembles it and who sends it out. And then when it came to the paid tier too, there was a section at a point in time where it was kind of like a weekly news roundup. So not the more in-depth stories that we still do over at Unbanked, but kind of just like, hey, these are headlines that you should be aware of. I would sum up like what I was doing for the paid tier at that point in time. So, I mean, yeah, that's how Unbanked came about. I was in the right place at the right time with the guy who, I would call him a founder of the whole newsletter.
And thank you for answering the question. I think what I learned here is that in order to get your foot through the door with any of these, finding like a good job, finding a good client, you just need to reach out to the right people, and you need to take the time to sit with people in real life. I've noticed this a lot in my work as a developer, is like sitting down with people, taking the time to reach out and have those conversations is most likely what's going to get you a job over skill. Because you could be as skilled as you want, or you could be one of the most skilled people as a developer. If you don't know how to talk with others, or you don't take the time to sit down with others, it's not going to work out pretty easily. So you are interested in giving some advice to other writers. I've personally written a few articles in the past on a personal blog, and I'm not really good at it because there's like a lot of things with punctuation and how long sentences are supposed to be, where when I read my work back, it's a bit difficult to keep going. It doesn't flow naturally. So I want to ask you a bit about your writing process. How do you get in the headspace to write? What kind of research do you do beforehand? And like, is there a specific environment that you need in order to write effectively?
Sure. So first I'll start with, what you kind of said last about like finding these opportunities, right? Sure. I think one, you do need to put yourself out there, do some outreach, even talk to some people who you think might not respond, or if there's an opportunity you really want, like definitely don't be afraid to chase it. And like I said, I think there's better ways to chase opportunities, and that's in terms of like who you're talking to. But I think, to be fair, right, I think part of it is kind of luck, right? Like you have to be looking for an opportunity, and whoever you're looking for an opportunity with needs to be looking for help. So I wouldn't underestimate the luck element, or even the right place, right time elements, because that's like something special. That's some magic that, it's almost like lightning in a bottle. It's something that's going to happen that might not happen again, but if you are able to catch it, it's pretty fortunate. Now, when it comes to my writing process, I mean, I think there's several ways, or different approaches, I should say, that I would take when writing something. So one is like, sometimes you might be, for lack of better words, sitting wherever you're sitting, and there's just like, maybe it's a trend, or maybe it's a current event, or maybe a better way to sum it up is just like, what's on your mind, right? Like what is something that's happening within whatever universe that you write about that's on your mind that you either have maybe you have strong opinions about, or you see people talking about, or you think it's going to be an emerging trend if it's not already a trend, or if it is already a trend, maybe you just kind of add your sort of expertise, commentary, stats, facts to it. I think that's one way. Like, you kind of feel driven by something that's been on your mind to put your thoughts out there about the topic. But I think on the flip side of that too, I think there is just like news events that could happen in the world that need coverage. And I mean, those are two different, completely different kinds of writing, right? I mean, if it's some sort of news event that needs coverage, you're reporting. It's not about your opinion or where you think a trend's going to go or what trend you think is emerging. It's about like the facts and like the fact of the matter, and this is what happened, and this is the implication, and this is it's very factual. There's not really much room for, or there's no room really to inject your opinion in there. But the other sort of writing, the first instance that I talked about, where you feel like driven to write about something because it's been on your mind, that is something that's, I mean, people would call it editorial, right? But it is something where you could say to yourself, okay, these are my thoughts on the matter. And I think there's a professional way to do it, in the sense that, like, you can support whatever argument you're trying to make with facts and stats and references to other pieces of news that really bolster your argument up and make it like something other people, I don't want to say believe in. It's not like you want people to necessarily believe. Well, I mean, what you're writing is true, right? But like, you need to support it. It can't just be this piece you put out there and somebody says to themselves at the end of the day, like, this person just shared their thoughts. Like, that didn't do anything for me. Like, you have to really make a good argument on good foundation for what you're writing about. So I think those are kind of the two sides of it. Like, you're either reporting or you're either doing something that's like more opinion editorial. Now, I also believe that, what do I need to successfully write or successfully research? I mean, the research pretty much starts with the news that's already out there. I mean, optimally, you can trace something back to the source, right? And in a lot of instances, the source is like you're talking to the person, team, group, company who the event happened to, if it's more of a reporting style. So if you could trace that thread back to where the action took place and get comments from them, you're in great shape. If it's more of an opinion thing, I would say the research is similar in the sense that, like, you gather all the resources that you can that sort of cover the topic that you're looking to write about, and form you form your conclusion at the end of it all. But like I said, you want supporting facts along the way, and there's a good chance those will come from those other pieces of material that you use in your research. So, I mean, research is, fortunately, these days it's pretty straightforward, right? It's not like I need to go to a library or dig through a bunch of books. Maybe that happens every once in a while if you're really looking to get in the weeds about a topic or something very particular. But I think the good news for us is that we can kind of just throw it into Google. It'll probably take us to a variety of websites, but through reading, let's say, a handful of those sites, you'll be able to get the gist of what's going on, or you'll be able to get the full story, which is even better. What you want to do, you want to know every side, what's happening in the facts. And in terms of the writing environment, I can kind of do work anywhere. I know some people are pretty particular. I don't know, like that Dr. Seuss book, like, what is it, Green Eggs and Ham? It's like in a box with a fox, and he makes all these funny rhymes where he can eat green eggs and ham anywhere. I can write anywhere, as long as I have my computer. That's definitely my preferred way to write. I totally need the laptop in front of me. I'm not really someone who takes notes on a phone or does anything along the lines of that. But yeah, as long as I have my laptop, I could probably write no matter where I am in the world.
So I'm going back to how I used to. I write like opinion, like editorial pieces. And that's kind of, I just get driven by some sort of subject. And one of those subjects that recently caught my attention was GPT-3 and this whole chat-based stuff, and the stable diffusion to generate images that Dolly is using. So when that started, it started becoming like mainstream news, I think around June or July. That's when I wrote like a piece about it saying, here's what I think is going to happen in the future. And I just went along with that, and I didn't really give any kind of supporting information or any links. And I think that's probably what's missing in a lot of my writing. Going through the blogs that you wrote, I saw that you have like a lot of different pictures and screenshots of conversations that you use to support your arguments, and I think that's very helpful. I'm very visual as a person, so whenever I see a picture, like, I feel that helps me retain information more. It helps me get more immersed in the writing. So yeah, that's definitely something that I've learned and from going through your work. I do want to ask you about GPT-3 and the new chat thing. And so I don't remember what it was called. I think it was like OpenAI. Yeah, OpenAI chat. So you can give it prompts and it'll write you articles or templates or whatever. Have you used this technology in your work at this point?
Yeah, great question. So I'm aware of OpenAI, GPT-3, and I've played around with it more for like I guess like recreation, and everybody's talking about it, so I want to see how it works. I haven't used it in my work. I have heard of people using it in their work, but I guess maybe it's not that like I'm hesitant or I don't see an obstacle, but what I have learned just in me playing around with it is that like you need to get your prompts right, right? Like you can't really just like throw any sort of question at it. It needs to be like formatted very properly, or what I guess I would call like formal for the AI, for it to even be able to like return an answer to you. So no, it's not something that's being used in my work. I'm not against using it in my work. I guess I just haven't really come across any instances, obstacle situations where I sat there and said to myself, you know what, I should be using this. If I had to guess when it could be a good time to use, and I've seen writers reference this. I don't know if anybody's put it into play, but a lot of people say like, hey, when you get writer's block, right? Like when people get writer's block, I think they might lean on a tool like this to kind of fill in the gap in terms of like, where do I go next, or where can I go next? But yeah, I mean, to sum it up, I've used it in the sense of like I wanted to know how it worked, and I think it could play a bigger role in the future. I have not used it in like a work context, but I'm not against using it in a work context. And I think it pretty much just comes down to I don't think I've been in a work situation where I felt like I needed to use OpenAI to get over the hump.
So I've been using it a lot more lately. The first time I encountered it, I was able to saw that you could use AI to write. But it never really appealed to me because whenever I read anything written by AI, it's very dry and bland, and for me, it doesn't feel like it has like the spirit of a writer. And maybe that's something that's going to change with time. But lately, I've been using it for templates. Like whenever I want to write a template for something, if I'm looking to secure a grant, instead of just writing my own grant request, I just ask it like, hey, can you write me a grant request for a Web3 company? And I give it some basic details, and it gives me a very nice template that then I can fill in my personal information. And that's been very useful. And then in my development work, a lot of people have been using it to rewrite their documentation, since it seems to be really good at doing stuff like that. I've even heard people of using it to write code at this point. But then again, I don't know, because whenever I read anything written by AI, it has this absolute confidence behind it, but you can't really trust that confidence. Like it's good at sounding confident in anything that it's trying to say, but most of the time it is wrong about something. And when it gets to these technical things, or these things like writing, where you have it's a sort of art where people recognize like there's a human behind this with a story. I don't think it does well in those fields so far.
So I'll jump in and say this. I think you make a couple good points in there. One, it totally does kind of read like a textbook when you ask it for something and it returns a prompt to you. And two, I think people maybe, I don't want to say put too much confidence in it, but there is this element that when people ask it a question or put a prompt in there, the response they get, or maybe the way that they think of OpenAI or any sort of AI that returns answers like this, they think of it as like an authoritative figure, right? Like, whoa, I asked the AI something and the AI gave me an answer. And like, I think it's probably a psychological thing, right? When you speak to an authoritative figure, like you just believe they're telling you the truth. Like, I don't know, the example that's in my head right now for some reason is like, if like a cop pulls you over and tells you something, like you're probably not really gonna like question it. Like it's an authoritative figure. You're just kind of, whether you like it or not, there's this level of like, okay, this being with authority has told me this, that, the other. Like I got to take their word for it. It's true, like it's almost like maybe they put the knowledge that the OpenAI or whatever authoritative figure has, it's on a pedestal a little bit. And you know what? This even links back to what you were saying about writing, right? Where things get supported with facts, and it bolsters your argument and makes it stronger. I would even say when it comes to an authoritative figure, or maybe you've been writing long enough, or you've become this like figure in either like popular media or popular culture, you can notice that they can just say things and people take their word for it. Like when it comes to investing, right? If Warren Buffett says something, people are gonna take his word for it and follow him. He doesn't. He should put facts out there. He should put statistics out there. But because he's him and he's built this reputation, people are gonna follow it. I think AI has become the same in that sort of sense, where it's now an authoritative figure. If people ask us something, they're going to take it as true. But I think to get the most out of it, and you were touching on this as well, is it's a tool that needs to be used alongside humans, right? Like it's not the replacement, the be all end all for people's work. It's like it has to meet you halfway, or you kind of use it as a tool alongside whatever your traditional process is.
Yeah, it sure is. So lately, there's been a lot of people that are and blog articles where they use the AI to generate the YouTube video or to generate the blog article, and you can always tell like it's lacking this. It's lacking something, and what I think that something is this human knowledge, and also like people are confident, but they're also wary of saying the wrong things, and they want to maintain their image. With AI, everything feels so robotic, and you can tell at some point. I don't know if that's constantly going to be a thing, but I feel like at the moment we totally need people to filter out what is being given back through these AIs, and to make sure that what is being said is at least somewhat true. Because a lot of the times you could just ask it something and it can give you an answer that it pulls through the latest 10 Google searches, and maybe that's science that is either outdated or science that hasn't been confirmed yet. So it's a tool, and it needs to be used in the right context. And I don't fear people being replaced by AI anytime soon, at least not in any of these creative spaces. So I want to ask one last question, or talk about one last thing before we jump to Block Dojo, because I feel like that's very relevant to people that would listen to this podcast. But one of your articles, which is titled, I believe, "We Are Not Early," you talk about how we're not early in this space. This has been going on for a while, and I really share this sentiment. But I see that a lot of people still hold on and cling to the belief that we're early, and that if you just either invest in the right coin or go down the right path, you're going to 100x whatever you invested or whatever you're doing. The question that I want to ask is what innovation do you see is lacking for this to start changing? So for us to actually get mainstream acceptance and use.
Yeah, well, first I'll say it's that was a super fun one to write. And that was one of the ones where I think I was sitting there and it was more of like a what was on my mind that I kind of turned into words for the article. So I'll start with saying this. I think so many people say we're early because I think it's some sort of bias that they have, or maybe some psychological thing that goes on, where I think, in my opinion, a lot of people have made bad investments, or they're spending their time and energy on a platform or service that literally just has zero demand. So instead of kind of acknowledging that, everybody makes mistakes, everybody makes a bad investment at some point in their life, everybody probably has some sort of like business venture that doesn't work out at some point in their life. Instead of accepting that, they failed, they kind of compensate for that by saying like, no, we didn't fail, like we're just early, I'm just the first person to the party. Now what I was saying in that article was that like the party's been going on for over 5 years at this point, for nearly 10, 11 years at this point. You're not early. These things have been going on. And to put that in another context, there's innovations that took place after some of the stuff you saw in blockchain or crypto that experienced rapid adoption extremely quickly. The example at the top of my mind is TikTok, right? TikTok only came into like our orbit maybe 2-3 years ago. And, I saw a stat yesterday that TikTok is now bringing in more marketing dollars than both Facebook and I forget the other platform, so I'm not even going to try to guess it. But it was Facebook and Google. Now, this platform that just appeared on the scene is now like a serious competitor when it comes to like ad spend and dollars. That being said, nobody was sitting there saying like we're early. It just so happened that they created a platform or service that people had demand for that really took off astronomically. Now, what I think needs to take place for people to stop showing up and saying the "we're early" argument is the same thing that I pretty much just explained with TikTok, right? You need to create these platforms and services that people have real demand for, that gets users using it and staying there. I think that's an important thing too. I think a lot of times in blockchain crypto, people think that getting users is like the battle's over, like the users are here, the community's here. You have to give them a reason to stay there. You have to have a good product, a good business at the heart of what's going on for people to stick around, continue want to shop with your brand or use your platform or service. And when you have that, and when you have those repeating customers, and when that demand for the platform is actually there, that's when things pick up. That's when you don't need to make the excuse that you're early. That's when it's just evident that people want to use what you've created. I think it really just comes down to that like the reason that people need to create products and services that people have a real demand for. And then when that takes place, you won't need to say things like we're early or we're not early. Like people are just you're going to have a successful business. And I think that's the goal.
The way I've been, so I got introduced to the blockchain space because I worked with a lot of the adult industry. And over there, they are pretty persecuted against, and they don't have access to traditional banking, credit, financial services like PayPal and Cash App. They struggle in those areas, and the blockchain has this unique advantage of anybody can join, anybody can use this. There's no limits, there's no middleman. You don't have to be worried about getting banned or anything. I think that's where the strength of this whole technology is, and that's where we need to focus more on. I hope we see that in the future, because like right now, I feel like we're kind of going in a different direction, or at least we were in the last couple of years. But that's still to be seen. I think this leads me to Block Dojo and what you're doing with this platform. So you guys are basically funding different startups and projects and giving them these courses to get them ready to enter the business world. Can you maybe give me some information about what this job entails? What do you do there? And as a VP, like what's your role?
Yeah, great question. And this is super fun to talk about too. So over at Block Dojo, we are an incubator program. So what that means, it's in person. It runs for 12 weeks. We only do 3 cohorts per year. We only accept 10 companies per cohort. And over those 12 weeks, if a company is accepted, we make an equity investment in the company. So we give them a little bit of capital in exchange for equity in their company. But more importantly than that, we give them the resources that they need to either build their business and thrive, or if their business has already been built, to improve and to continue to be successful. So by that I mean we give them things like R&D partners, so that they have sort of clients and customers right out of the gate, or at the very least somebody beta testing their platform that either gives them the market feedback that validates the solution that they've built, or lets them know that like, hey, what you've built isn't really right for our business, our market, and this is why. Which pretty much gives them the information that like, the solution that they built, it's not right, that they need to pivot, that they need to go a different direction with it. We also give them things like mentors and advisors, people who have been through that business journey before, who can help them navigate, the obstacles they're either bound to run into, or just different things to be aware of in business. If somebody comes to us as more of like the CEO visionary, we do give them development resources. So we hook them up with an engineer who helps them build this platform so that they do have the MVP that can be, battle tested by those R&D partners that I just mentioned. And I mean, all along the way, we give workshops over the 12 weeks. Like I said, it's an in-person program. So workshops are administered. And I mean, a few of the most popular ones are like, towards the end of the program, we have a communications expert come in and teach them how to talk to investors. Financial modeling and teaching them how to do that is also like a huge one. But there's a variety of different workshops that we give all along the way. And then at the end of the 12 weeks, we help them raise their pre-seed round. And if they continue to hit key milestones 1 year down the road, we help them raise their seed round. So I'm going to kind of sum that up as like $2 million total. We help them raise their first $2 million. And now when it comes to what I do at the dojo, right? So I'm the vice president of the deal flow department. And I mean, day to day, I look at a ridiculous number of pitch decks. I mean, before we got on this call and after we sort of get off this podcast, I know I have a boatload of them waiting in my inbox because our first cohort for our US office, which is going to be in Miami. It opens on May 6th. People are applying to that. So I look at a ridiculous number of pitch decks each day. I have a lot of conversations with either early stage startups or maybe people who are a little further along and are trying to understand if the Block Dojo is a good fit for them. I spend a lot of times going to events. It's easiest to get to the ones that are local to me in the Philadelphia area, but pretty much all over the world in terms of like, hey, will there be potential early stage startups here? Or will there be, maybe people who are interested in helping the dojo as mentors and advisors? Or hey, will there be investors here who are going to be interested in the 3 investor lunches that we do at the end of the program and the investor showcase? So in a lot of instances, I'm kind of like the first point of contact that either an early stage startup, a mentor, an advisor, or sometimes an investor might touch base with if they're interested in helping the Block Dojo in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, thank you for explaining. That seems, which is pretty cool. I'm happy to hear that you guys are doing this. It's definitely something that's needed. As a developer, I have a bunch of people reaching out to me, and I also have a bunch of ideas of platforms that I want to make or platforms that other people want me to make. And one of the biggest difficulties for people in my position is reaching out to find investments, because there's this social element that I guess I'm to, and people that work with me also are not very accustomed to. We mostly like to develop things or build or think, imagine stuff more so than getting into the nitty gritties of how to get money, how to make this business viable, how to get the right following and the right support. One question that pops up is how do you decide which startup is worthy for the investment, time, and support? You said you guys do 10 per cohort, and I assume let's say you get 100 people minimum applying to try and enter this. How do you choose the right companies?
Yeah, first I'll backtrack to your investment question or kind of statement, right? I feel like when it comes to investment, right, it's as our investment director says, it's more of an art than a science. And I feel like for early stage startups and what I realize in the work that I do and the people that I talk with, it's difficult for them because when it comes to pretty much a lot of things in life, but raising money especially, people don't really want to give money to a stranger. And I mean, just imagine walking down the street, somebody says, hey man, can I have $100? You might, nah, you know what? No, you can't. I don't know you. I'm not going to open my wallet. But then imagine a friend comes to you and says, hey, you know what? I need to borrow $100. I'm going through a tough time. You probably open your wallet and say, yeah, man, you can borrow this money. You don't even need to give it back. So, I mean, looking for investment is almost similar in a sense where an investor would prefer if you had a warm introduction to them, if they knew you as a person, maybe you've sat down a couple times. And it also comes down to do they have the appetite for whatever business venture that you kind of have, right? I mean, not all investments are right for all sorts of people. And it doesn't necessarily mean they think that you have a bad business or something. It could just literally be part of their mandate that they don't touch investments that look like, X, Y, or Z. So I think it's important as, if any startups are out there listening or people who are in the process of fundraising, just to keep that in mind. I mean, it takes a lot of conversations to raise a little bit of money, but don't get discouraged and kind of just keep in mind that you need a relationship. It's beneficial to have a relationship versus doing a cold outreach or going on the hunt for money. Now, when it comes to, because you're right, we get so many applicants. I see so many applications per day. Who we kind of kick up to the next level, who we send to the investment committee, and ultimately who we extend an offer to. I think, it's not a one size fits all. There's totally a couple anomalies, but I will say the companies, the startups that have the most success do have a few characteristics in common. And I will say that, if you come to us as a team that is both a CEO and a CTO, it significantly increases your chances for success, right? Because if that's the case, you probably have an MVP built, or at least you have somebody who can work on the engineering, the infrastructure, the platform behind it all. And that probably puts you ahead of the pack, because then it means you can get to market quicker, or at least get that market feedback faster. And that's, that's invaluable. It also matters, as a founder, what's your previous experience? are you someone who's in it? Does it make sense that you as the founder started this type of business? So let's say you worked in, I don't know, let's say that you were, let's say that you worked in a bank and you're trying to start some sort of, I don't know, arts company. Like you kind of might question how that person came to that conclusion or why that person thinks that they're the right person to run that type of company. And I'll say this because when it comes to industries, right, there's languages that are spoken. You need to kind of have that vocabulary, that dialogue. It is like not only it's walking the walk and talking the talk. And I think, especially if somebody's looking to sort of fund and fuel your business operations, they need to know that like you're somebody who can thrive in whatever field it is that you're going into. And it also comes down to like the founders, right? And that part of it touches on that previous experience they have, but like, a good founder, I don't want to say it's like instinct that you could just see it, but like there's characteristics and qualities to their personality that kind of just let you know that they're going to be a good person to sort of work with, right? We're a team, we're interested. It's not only like you go through the program, then we spit you out. That's not what we do. Like we give you all the resources and help that we have in our world to make you successful. And then post program, we do the same thing. Like you're an alumni company of ours. We want you to be successful. So a good founder, there's just something about their personality that you can usually see pretty quickly. Because a good founder, they're like conscious and they kind of know that like, hey, if the solution's not working, like it's okay to fail fast and pivot. Like you have to have those qualities. Like, so I'd say the opposite of those qualities, which is probably easier than describing those qualities themselves, is like, if you're like stubborn or like you're short-sighted or like you really put the blinders on when it comes to whatever mission you're on, like that's probably an indication that like you probably have a bit of work to do on yourself as a founder before your startup company team can probably truly see that greater success.
That gives me that makes me past different founders that I've had the pleasure of getting to know. I've worked with a lot of startups in Web3 as a developer, and I think I understand what you're saying about the founders have a certain quality. There's this intenseness to their personality. They are good planners. They're strong characters, and it always feels like they know what they're doing. And then you have people that, even though they might be good at technical stuff, they might have a business that doesn't go under. They still have this, like you said, stubbornness to them, where they're not willing to accept something isn't working out correctly or something needs to change. They're very narrow-minded about how things run, and even if the business doesn't fail, it just keeps going on in a way that it never really grows into what it can ultimately be. And that work on the work on character that a lot of people have to do in order to become good founders it's not really easy work, and it's you have to go through like a lot of failures in order to get to that point where you can actually succeed. You're gonna have to fail like dozens of times. You're gonna have to like be able to learn from your mistakes, and you have to be humble in a way, and you have to know your place in the hierarchy. And then the outreach thing. So you said like you need to be in the right place at the right time. There's like a luck element to it. You also need to spend time reaching out to people, even if you think they might not respond. I think that to find somebody that covers all that ground, it's probably pretty rare. So in terms of all of the companies that you guys help and support from startup phase until they're like full-fledged and making a profit, you for sure have had to deal with companies that have failed, or they are kind of like stuck in time where they never really grow. How do you mitigate the risk of failure, and how do you make sure that there's this constant growth, even if it's not just monetary?
Sure. So in terms of like mitigating the risk, I feel like that happens in pretty much the initial interviews that we do before we ultimately make the decision if you're accepted into the program or not. I mean, that's a really good place, and honestly the best place to spot red flags or maybe a founder or a team that wouldn't be a good fit for the program. You kind of want to weed out these issues before the program begins. But let's say for some reason it wasn't weeded out, that in the program there's like some sort of complications. I think there's instances where maybe the company itself might stop engaging with the program. So like they stop showing up, they stop going to the workshops. And if that's the case, and I know our headquarters is over in London, I know it could take place that like you're probably not going to be invited to be sort of, well, we're not going to make capital introductions for you, right? If you're not willing to, show up and play your part, it gives us a reason not to sort of provide the resources that, when you join the program, like you sign an agreement to, you're coming here to do this job, and in return, we're going to do this job for you. So if somebody breaks that agreement, I'm not going to say it goes out the window, but it's going to be really difficult, or there's going to need to be some amending that needs to get done for, both parties to sort of fulfill their obligations that need to be fulfilled. The easiest way to do it is definitely just, you weed it out before it begins, because if it's almost too late if they're in the program and causing problems. And I think I'll add to that too, though. It's not always like I think it's the nature of the beast too, right? Like, of course, there's that statistic like 9 out of 10 startups fail. Okay, whatever. But the thing is, like, the nature that the beast is, like, it's true. There's a lot of people with business ideas. Not all the ideas are good. So of course, there's going to be some that go through the program that really rise to the top, or as I call them, superstars. And then there's going to be some whose performance, just isn't as great, just isn't necessarily something to write home about, where, you have a good business idea. We gave you all the resources you need to be successful. You're doing all that you can. And maybe you get your market feedback and like the demand really just isn't there. It's always going to be the sort of nature of like investing in early stage ventures, right? Some people are going to be superstars, but at the same time, there's going to be a tranche of early stage companies that just don't make it very far.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I'm a person that I not very fit for business. I know a lot of people in my circles that are pretty much the same. It takes time to develop a good idea and to know exactly what needs to be done to execute it properly. So for those companies, DAOs, projects that they have an idea and they're pretty passionate about it and want to get started, but are lacking a direct source of funding. What kind of advice could you give? Because you most likely have had to deal with those people as well when you turn different companies and DAOs down.
So if I understand the question correctly, it's just like, hey, if somebody's in a sort of position where maybe they're getting their company off the ground, but like they're having trouble or they're facing obstacles, first they'll say, hey, you know what, have a conversation with me, and we'll talk through it. We'll see what you need to be. So questions I ask to see like where somebody is, just like they tell me all about their business, and I say, hey, like, what do you need at this point in your business journey? I think that's a good place for maybe companies, founders in that position to take a look at when answering that question. And then, a lot of times that you're going to find people are going to say something like, we need access to funding. We need introductions to partners, potential partners in the industry. So, and not just like to sort of talk my book, I guess, but like in a lot of those instances, and this comes back to the investment thing I said earlier, right? You need that sort of relationship with a company, investor, partner previously, right? People don't just want to do like this cold outreach thing unless you really come to them with this like rock star idea and they're like, well, how has nobody found this man or woman? You need these relationships. People need to know who you are, what you do, know about you, know that you're somebody that they can trust and put their money in, their time and energy in. So if companies find themselves in that position, I would totally recommend an incubator program or an accelerator, because I mean, a good incubator, a good accelerator will do that for you. They're going to kind of nurture you in a way. They're going to make these introductions to the people that you would really benefit from knowing from working alongside. They might give you a little bit of money like we do over at the Block Dojo. And not only will that keep your company afloat for X amount of time, but, we're also giving you the tools and resources that you need to thrive afterwards. So, I mean, it really, in a lot of instances, it comes down to like almost like a network problem, right? Like your success, it's not strictly limited to, who's in your network, who can help you out, who can you reach out to, but like, it'd be an understatement if I didn't say that plays a significant part in the success your business is going to have, especially in its early stages when like you don't have proper marketing and all the other elements that move a machine.
Yeah, to go back to what you said about like when right now, a lot of people will go for money because that's That is a generalized solution to a lot of problems. It can help you pay for marketing. It can help you pay for months of development or whatever it is that you need to do at the time. I think that that's not a good answer in a way because it's such a generalized answer. Like everybody needs money for something, right? And just saying that, oh, I need money for this or I need money, being more clear about what exactly is missing in your environment for you to be able to launch or sustain a business. Maybe that's marketing, maybe that's organization. Maybe you're not an organized person, you're a thinker. Maybe you're a developer, but you don't have I don't know, somebody that does outreach and communications. So being very specific about what you need in your journey right now, I think is something that's missing. And that I've definitely like missed out on asking in the past, like saying, oh, I need maybe 3 months runway for development and somebody to handle organization for me. Or I think that from just having this conversation, it seems like something that would help a lot to talk about in the future when looking for funding. Could you confirm that or deny that, or
No,
just like maybe
definitely.
expand?
I'm happy you said that, right? Because you can't just ask for money. You have to be specific. What is this money going to fuel? Is your first hire going to be a CTO? Is your first hire going to be a marketing person? Do you need money because maybe you work in an industry where there's a lot of legal obstacles, legal waters that you need to navigate? So you have to be specific in your asks. And you're right, like it's much better to come with a very particular set of needs rather than throw a blanket statement over something like even if you said like we need marketing, okay, what does that actually mean and why do you actually need marketing? Like is it marketing for new user acquisition? Is it marketing because you're trying to sell a product? Like you just have to be very specific in your asks, and the more like granular, the more specific that you can get, the better the help is probably going to be, because then people can really pinpoint your problems, which means that they can pinpoint the solutions to those problems.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think that that's a big lesson that I've learned this year going through the market conditions that we have and seeing like how many companies have failed recently. And I think being conscious of what you need is something that a lot of business people have to they have to develop this consciousness about what they need and how they're going to have to proceed. And it's not the easiest task. So last thing I wanted to talk about today is I saw you are a coffee person. You enjoy coffee, and I do too. One thing that I'm guilty of is just using any coffee that I find in Walmart or Target or whatever. I don't really try out new things. So I kind of want to maybe learn, what do you do? How do you find new coffees? How do you find something new and fresh that you?
God, man, this could be a whole another podcast episode. So, I mean, yeah, I really like coffee. If you went to patrickscoffee.com, I mean, like, I roast coffee myself and I sell it. It's online only, there's no storefront. The way I prepare coffee, I make espresso in a machine called the La Pavoni. James Bond actually uses that in one of his movies, but that's like a tangent. So, to answer the question, like, how to find coffees, I mean, like, man, once you really start getting into it, you know what you like and what you don't like, and maybe what you consider like experimental, or you kind of learn. I mean, maybe I would compare it to like any other thing that has like tastings. People do like wine tastings or people do like whiskey tastings. There's a set of tasting notes that are going to be recurring. So like you get a sense of like what something is, or like what flavor or taste something has in it or doesn't have. So I can tell you, like, when it comes to coffee, I mean, like, I like some of the flavors that are like, I call them chocolatey, but like if you read the descriptions, it'll be like cocoa powder or something along the lines of that, or like cacao. It'll be like something like that, or there's tasting notes like raw sugar and different like fruits, and you get a feel for it in that regard. And then once you have a couple of those and you say, okay, wow, I really like this one, and one of the tasting notes is like brown sugar, and I like the brown sugar effect in there. Or hey, maybe one of the tasting notes is like lemon or fermented peach. Like it really does get that specific, and you know that you like it. Maybe the next time you look, like, you have an idea of what you're gonna like. So like, let's say you like lemon, maybe you'll like something adjacent to that, like orange, right? Like the citrusy thing that has like a specific sort of, I don't know, profile, sort of taste, sort of brings back whatever sort of memory to it, and you kind of just start going down those different paths. And then at the same time, you learn what you don't like, right? Like me personally, I tell you, like, I'm not big on coffees that are kind of acidic. And I mean, so like acidic kind of tasting notes, right? It might be some of those citrus things, but too much citrus for me. So you learn over time. I mean, and the way I got into it, like you just kind of dive in head first. Where first I made coffee with the French press, and then I was doing pour over coffees. Then I got like a really good espresso machine, and I think espresso is the best way in the world to make coffee because it is so concentrated that you kind of just get a whole action packed sort of sip, action packed sort of drink in a very small amount of coffee that enters your cup. So yeah, I mean, man, I could talk about coffee all day, but I think if somebody's looking for the journey, like first kind of understand what you like, understand why you like it, and then that'll take you to new places like along that path of what you like, along the path of what you don't like.
I'll have one last question. I'm really doing this. I've learned a lot, and it's been like very fun to have this conversation. So just to mention something real quick, I personally always drink things for the effect, whether that be coffee or tea or whatever. I'm not necessarily, or in the past, I wasn't necessarily looking for the taste. That was something that like didn't even matter to me. Like specifically with wine, I really enjoy wine. When I started drinking wine, I was just drink as much as I can for the effect, and I didn't really care or enjoy. I actually dislike the taste. But now as I grow older and I talk to people who have this sense of taste where they I feel like they're more intimate or close to that their sense of smell than I am. I've learned to like take a step back and take a minute and actually like enjoy the taste of something and explore the taste of something, give it time. But yeah, so that's been my journey, and I'm definitely going to be drinking more coffee in a more ritualistic way, hopefully. So last question is, what's your favorite coffee and why?
My favorite coffee is Pat's coffee. You know, the coffee I roast at home and drink every single day, and it's my favorite because it's the best in the world. It doesn't get better than that.
I'm going to be putting that in the description. The Pat's Coffee site in the description. If anybody's interested in checking that out, please do. That's how you support this podcast. All right, thank you so much, Pat. This was a great time. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope we get to talk again in the future.